Hello, hello. Welcome to the Hacking HR January series, third day. Uh, we have a very interesting panel today. We'll be talking about the cognitive resilience, preparing the HR mind for the VUCA and the BANI world. Um, I have my colleague Jessa at the backstage, and she will be helping me manage all the logistics for the session. We will be introducing you to the panel shortly, and you would see them joining us on the screen in just few seconds. In the meantime, if everybody who's joining us can share where they are joining from, please leave your location in the chat. Hello, everyone. That's our lovely panel with us today. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm good. Hi, everyone.
Dalit, I think we can't hear you. Either you are mute or there's a mic issue. Let's have a quick round of introductions by our panelists. We start with Vinod, and then others may take the lead.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Vinod Bidwaik. I am from India, Pune, which is the place is near Mumbai. I am a CHRO and Group HR Director for the media company. It's the largest media house in the state, Sakar Media Group, and AP Global A, which is a diverse group, which actually Sakar Media Group is a part of AP Global A. I am responsible for all total employee life cycle for the group. I have total 25 years of leadership experience, work, Indian and multinational companies like Swedish companies, Dutch companies. Alfa Laval is one of the company. DSM India is another company, and big Indian companies like Automobile, Mahindra and Mahindra, Samperit, and many more. My expertise lies into organization development, culture building, talent management, talent development, and of course, industrial relations. So that's about me. And very glad and thanks Hacking HR for giving me the opportunity to interact with the audience.
Thank you, Vinod. Shimona, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I am Simona de Graaf. I am the founder and CEO of our company, Idealis. Background, I'm an organizational psychologist by training. I have my doctorate in organizational psychology, and my focus has always been on human motivation, what moves people, what gets people going. I took that background onto Wall Street first. So I was on Wall Street for a while, and then I moved into technology and then did a lot of advisory work, and then finally was most recently a CHRO of a public company. Today, I am a coach and advisor. I have a team of people who are located mostly in the States. I'm based out of Amsterdam, but perhaps my proudest accomplishment is I'm a mom of 2 children and also of 2 dogs who you may hear as it's late in the day and it's probably dinner time for them. So thank you for having me, Natasha, and nice to see everyone here.
Great, Shimona. Thank you so much. Charmaine, over to you.
Hi everyone. Wherever you are in the world, hello. I'm Charmaine. I am the founder and CEO of Chapter 2 LLC, which is a people first leadership and organizational development consultancy. I'm based in New York, and I built my career in HR and business strategy. So really happy to be here. I love hacking HR and this community.
Great. Thank you, Charmaine. Dalit.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay, great. So very happy to be here as well. I'm based in Israel, and I also have a background of 30 years in HR in many different organizations from Israel, but also I used to be based in New York as well, in the States. And today, in the last couple of years, I'm an organizational strategic consultant working with many companies around the globe, helping them with people and leadership and organizational culture.
Awesome. Thank you. My first question to the panel, and I'm sure even the audience is curious to know, what's the difference between VUCA and BANI? has been in existence for a long time in conversations, be it the management books, be it the organizations and the leadership conversations. Vani is something which is completely new and recent. So, what's the difference? How is it you're looking at the organizations managing both of them and ensuring that there is enough adaptability in the organization for it? Question is open to the complete panel. Anybody may take the lead and others may follow.
Okay, shall I? Okay, I think there are a lot of challenges, and let's actually classify these two things in before pandemic COVID and after pandemic COVID, the new normal, where we heard that VUCA was coined by some consultant about vulnerability and all these things, complexity, uncertainty, ambiguity, all these things. And now for a few days or few months, years, we can say it's bunny is evolved, where the world is brittle, non-linear, what they are saying. Of course, there are some challenges about, you don't know what will happen tomorrow. And the COVID and pandemic taught us that, imagine the world stopping, because of only one virus. And business, I will say that, business were always challenging situation. The situation were always challenges. Now there are a lot of challenges what we are looking forward, like geopolitical issues, this extreme polarization happening around the world in different about the the thought process of the people, of the nations, of the some groups. The extra activism by NGOs about sustainability is increasing, and the global the world is totally different if you compare a few years back, and you don't know what will happen tomorrow. And that's why organizations are facing much more challenges today, because if you remember a few years back, we used to work on the strategy for 5 years. For example, every organization used to say that our strategies are for 5 years, and then HR, finance, and marketing used to align those 5-year strategy. Today it's you don't know what will happen tomorrow. The organizations then became from 5 years to 3 years. I remember in few organizations where I was working, the strategy exercise was for 3 years, and now it is changing every year, that okay, how we can fine tune. So world is becoming agile, very fast, non-linear, because you will not know what will happen there. Of course, VUCA, I am can say that there is not much difference, because the terminologies are coined by the consultant, and every few years these terminologies come, but the fact of the life has not changed, and that is the world is really polarized. I think and it is again I will use the oxymoron, polarize. It's actually two different words, but also fragmented. We can say at one side it is polarized, another side is fragmented, and that is affecting the business, because then your compliance issues, you specific marketplaces are changing, the behavior of the customers are changing. And there are some examples where if something happens in some country, the other country may take the another views, and that may affect the business. And this challenge is specifically for the global organizations, because they have to take a different stand on different countries, or what is their corporate philosophy. So it's a very challenging situation for us now, for the businesses. The world is changing totally. In fact, the world has changed, and you will not know that what will happen tomorrow. And that's why it's the future of the work or future of the business is little bit shabby, and the organization has to survive, organization has to come forward, organization has to train the people, organization has to come up with the new strategy, new skill set required. The technology is disruptive technology, what we used to use the word. But disruption is not because of the technology, it is because of the conflict between our minds. So there are different types of conflict. The conflict is happening at a society level, conflict is happening at a individual level. That's why the resilience, the world is very important, and is a very important topic, that cognitive resilience, because those conflicts, what's happening around the world, I will say positive or negative, is impacting the workplace, impacting the business. And then we have to come up with the solution that what we can do differently to address those. That is my few take, and other panelists can add in between.
Yeah, Vinod, I love what you said, because I think it's a calling for all of us to acknowledge that it's a reality. right, that this notion of uncertainty is just going to be the new reality. It's not, change isn't coming, it's here, and we're having to navigate it. And I think anybody on this panel or listening can appreciate that you're probably going through change right now, whatever that change may be. When I differentiate what VUCA is versus Bani is, I actually think of VUCA as context, that the context around us is changing, it's complex, it's uncertain. And a lot of the words in the Bani acronym, which I had not heard of until I frankly joined this panel and had to look up what is Bani, it's much more about the experience. That VUCA can cause people to feel anxious, uncertain. It can cause people to have to think in a nonlinear fashion, right? So it almost seems like the two complement one another, because we must know how to live in a VUCA world and acknowledge that experiences of what falls under Bani, that there is going to be nonlinear thinking and solutions, that there's going to be anxiety associated with going through, complexity, uncertainty. Combined sort of speaks to the fact that there's a lot of unknown, and that's contextual unknown, and there's also experiential, like we just don't know how to navigate the two. So that's how I would bridge the two together. And I think I love what you said around positioning organizations and thinking about what needs to be different, because if we know that's a reality, I think it's about how do we set ourselves up and learn to navigate and manage through it.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, the way that I think about it, and I love what you both share, the way that I really think about it is, what's internal versus external, right? And I think sometimes we're hearing all these terms and people are like, what does all of this mean? And how does it apply? And, Bani is definitely a new term. So I really think about Bani in terms of, and for those who are on the call, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. And VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And the way that I think of both of them is that Bani primarily thinks about what are the internal responses to the challenges that are being faced, and how are those characteristics or behaviors internal. So when I think about this in the context of an organization, what is the organizational culture like, right? Because if you have a culture that is prone to high anxiety, and we're humans, so that it applies to how we just deal with challenges in general as humans, right? So that internal processing. But if you're in an organization that, the culture is one of highly reactive, you're likely to be really a lot more impacted by what's happening externally, and which is how I look at VUCA, right? What are the external factors that we're not able to control? The pandemic, right? World just goes wild. And anything else that's happening that the organization cannot control, but that's going to then cause Bani type reactions, right? So how do we, for me, that's how the two are connected. One is more external focus, can't control what the world is doing and how that's impacting the organization. And the other one, Bani, is internal focus. How is this organizational culture and the organization structured to deal with the things that are happening? How are we responding?
I love everything that you said, and I want to tackle it, just not to repeat, and to add on that, and to tackle it from the leadership area, because I think that Bani is fairly a new term that we learned, as Shimona, you said, rightfully so. Like myself, I came to understand it just for this panel. And I think that the leadership that we used to see and work with, they dealt with the VUCA word, which is very, very complex. Now add to that the layer of the Bani. And I liked, Vinod, what you said around, so how to plan for this so changing, evolving world that we are living in. So first of all, I think the leadership has a significant role to play. And I think that we are moving from, we used to have plans for 5 years, 3 years. Then, we use the agile mode in order to plan. And now I think that for every action that we are doing, we need 2 plans, plan A, plan B, and to sometimes differ between those two, or to choose, on the spot, because we will never know what is going to happen and what is waiting for us around the corner. that we will need to act upon. And it makes the leadership role very complex. And I strongly believe, and this is what I saw during my career, that leadership were much more rounded with the EQ, are more likely to have also the cognitive resilience and the connection, to the dealing with VOCA and BANI those days. So this is how I see it.
Great, thank you. Some really interesting insights out there. So I would love to know, since there was constant reference of cognitive resilience, and what I understood from the conversation so far is BANI is all about complexity and lack of comprehension, whereas VUCA is all about multitude factors and variables that are at play, both internally and externally. So given that as the context, uh, where do you see cognitive resilience playing the role? And even before we deep dive into it, what is cognitive resilience in the first place? Again, question is open to all panelists. Anybody may take the lead and others may follow.
So I can start, and I think that cognitive resilience, if I'm not mistaken, is actually taken from a different arena, more medical or more anatomic, space. And I think that the idea of cognitive resilience is the way that human being and people, going through a crisis or going through a stress and still continue to be flexible, can to continue and be healthy and overcome those either trauma or bad experience as we go along with it. This is how I see cognitive resilience. And it doesn't mean a big thing like I think Charmaine, you mentioned the COVID-19 that all the world went through, and it was a real shock at the beginning, and we didn't know what to do. And this is where great leaders are coming out of this crisis, and the fact that humanity continue to move on and continue to thrive and grow. This is exactly the cognitive resilience in my mind. And I think this is extremely important those days for organizations, for people, and this is something that will continue to play a significant role, as we moving forward. I will stop here and maybe and hand it over to you, Shimona, to maybe add on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think of this topic, there's so many experts out there, and I never propose that I know anything about these things, because there's people far smarter than me out there. And so I lean on a lot of, what you said, Dalit. Also, there are books like Tomorrow Mind, which is a new book that was written by someone who's focused on positive psychology that we lean on a lot as a firm. The Art of Impossible, where they do studies on like what helps people do what is seemingly impossible. There's concepts of habits, like how do people figure out how to build habits. Atomic Habits is obviously a big pop book. But I see a commonality in all of those, which is it's a mindset. And I think that's why it's called cognitive resilience. There's physical resilience. We can withstand a lot of things. But cognitive resilience is really about mindset, and something that you see across all of the researchers and authors and people who are doing this work. They find that people who are deeply resilient have a mindset of, I can get through it. I'll be curious. I'll lean on other people. It may be hard, but I'll find a way. If there's uncertainty, I'll go seek information and find a way to become more certain. There's a belief in self that I can handle it. And all of that builds up to cognitive resilience. And I think if I look at my own children who are a source of inspiration for me, today, I think we teach children how to be resilient far more than we did when I was growing up, right? My child is learning things like mindfulness and how to take deep breaths if he's losing his temper. And we didn't have any of that. And so I think we've learned over the years that these are skills and habits we can build. But ultimately, if we have it, we can put up with a lot of things. And if I look at what we're seeing today in the world, the mental health crisis, the fact that there are a lot of people who don't feel comfortable in environments and are nervous to go into a be in the office environment or stay at home environment, all of that is going to be change, and we have to be resilient to it. And some of that begins from the center within rather than sort of looking for sources externally. And I think that's where mindset begins. So when I think of cognitive resilience, word cognitive being your mind, your brain, I do think a lot of it starts with getting yourself in the right mindset. And I think a lot of the research has proven that that's a big piece of the puzzle. Not all of it, but a big piece of it. Charmaine, what do you think?
Thank you. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I want to also acknowledge and appreciate that you mentioned the mental health piece and not being an expert, because for me, that's one of the things that scares me the most as an HR professional and business leader, is that a lot of times people who aren't skilled and who aren't professionals are speaking in depth about it. It's like, hey, and I'm a little bit more attuned to it because I have an identical twin sister and she actually is a licensed mental health practitioner. So we talk about these things a lot. So in the context of cognitive resilience, you're right? Cognitive is mind. It really is about, how is someone dealing with and their capacity to effectively cope with the adversities that are being thrown at them, right? And in the world of business, any organization, just the world that we live in, that's going to happen a lot. So thinking about the topic and even the question, it's really how well prepared is the organization, the employees, the HR team, right, to adapt, right? Because all of these challenges and the resilience piece is going to come in terms of how are we adapting to what's being thrown at us and what the new environments are bringing and the emotions, right, and the experiences that they're causing. So for me, it's about the adaptation, but for me, that has to have support, right? A lot of times we tell people be resilient, but we also don't consider, if I bring in like the DEI lens, who are we expecting resiliency from, right? That group tends to look in a way that is not consistent across the board. So I think it's not just about the individual, but how are we supporting that individual in the context of a working environment? Does that organization have the right structures in place to support, what's happening? Because we talk about organizations, but the reality is that organizations are made up of organisms, right? We're all human. So it's not this robot. We are human. And those emotions and the feelings and the physical and mental responses and strains that are going to happen when we are facing uncertainty or challenges are very real.
I think rightly everybody has spoken on this. I will say it's the ability, it's the capacity, it's the capability of the individual to adopt anything positively. I will put in that way. So, and mainly from this adverse situation or maybe stressful situation, maybe traumatized situation, where how the individual actually bounce back. So it's a natural inherent, I will say, the tendency or the capability of the person positively coming back from those situations. So that's the I put in a way resilience. And it's, you rightly said that it's about the organization, how we can develop the organizational and how we can create a psychological safety nets in the organization so that people are willing to share what they want. And if they are suffering something or they are challenging, there are certain issues within the teams or within the organization, how the organization is open to listen them is very important. So I think that's very important to understand, that how we can improve or train or develop the people to understand that context, that it's the ability and it's individual character, I will say individual trait or characteristic, but can be developed. So that way, because cognitive it's actually our mind works in a different way, where there are things happen first in the mind and then in reality. We say that is a picture is painted two times. One is mind and second is on the paper. So resilience is helping them to paint a positive picture and coming out from those adverse situations, and help them to develop that ability, that capacity, that capability of the individuals.
Some fantastic thoughts in there. So, taking a look at the resilience bit and the mental health bit, in your experience, are you now seeing the organizations and HR leaders moving towards collaborating with coaches? And they could be emotional quotient coaches or performance coaches, to guide the leadership team to think in the direction of um, cognitive resilience and mental well-being while managing the VUCA and the BANI state of the uh, organization and the world outside. Again, question is open. Anybody may take the lead.
Yes, I think there is a positive things happening. I will say that organizations are investing, focusing on this mental uh, health and wellness of the individuals, of the people. But the efforts needs to be more, I will say. They are trying to do that, but then sometimes because of the situation, business priorities, uh, those priorities take a back seat. The organizations are investing, but then how individuals are taking, because still in certain, I will say, certain regions or certain countries, there is a, I will say, taboo when somebody goes to the for the psychological help. Specifically, if I speak in India or Asia, people are not still willing, and they need some confidentiality to matter. So, how we are actually creating those atmosphere, those culture within the organization is very important. Second is how we are developing the people in, because we already spoke that everybody added that emotional intelligence, self awareness, empathy, all these things plays a major role. The leadership also need to understand that how they are actually working towards the improving the adversity quotient, because we know emotional quotient intelligence is the IQ, we know emotional, and that is possible when there is a coaching happening on a mindfulness, because what will happen tomorrow we may not be aware, but we can actually do the scenario planning. There can be scenarios and then can be work out, but at least the leaders need that support, that coaching, that how they can handle that if some situation comes, if that adversity comes. And that is very important to understand that though organizations are trying, I think there are in certain areas we need to focus more and put as a right priority, as a strategic exercise, I will say. I have seen there are few organizations who are putting in their strategy document as the talent management, and part of that is how they are building the resilience capability among the employees. So it's happening. But then another question is, are there any such consultant easily available in the market? Are they rightly understanding the context of the business, and are they really developing the leader? Second is the mindset of leaders themselves. Sometimes when somebody takes the leadership role, they think that they know everything in the world and they have this, of course that's why they are the leader. But they also need to understand, leaders also need to understand that they need support, they need coaches, they need mentors to develop such skills. So I think organization point of view, there is a positive, I will say, the awareness happening in the organization, but the efforts need to be more, what I think.
I would like to add to that two main things. One is to say that yes, today I see more and more organizations and leaders are taking coaches, and they know what they don't know, and willing to get some help from outside, and this is good, but it's not enough. It's not enough. It's far from being optimal. And I want to tell you about something that I did in one of the organizations that I used to be the CHRO for. It was 3 years ago, I think, during the pandemic, and it was a very large organization, very global one. We were spread into 24 different countries, and I decided to bring the concept of a book club to the organization. And we invited leaders, and we said, if you join, you will get free books. And we started with the book of Permission to Feel. And we also took an external facilitator who came every month after we gave those free books. Whoever wanted it, digital or physical, and they came after they read the book, and we had a conversation like in other book clubs, that people are doing. And it was fascinating because all of a sudden, leaders comes together and discuss the things that they never discussed before, and they have the permission not just to read about the permission to feel, but actually the permission to feel. It was very successful. We did it more and more, and leaders found it very useful, and they really, really liked it. So sometimes, it's not even about one-to-one coaching, but even to gather a group of leaders who can work together, discuss together, experience together, and all of a sudden it can bring a lot of good stuff and also resilient, obviously.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And thank you for sharing. I love what we're discussing because it's so important. So to answer the question, Tasha, yes, and, right? I think, and there's a lot more work to be done to help bridge that gap of understanding, because we think about how, organizations were traditionally, leadership took on a certain look, and what was measured by success or certain behaviors. So now when you start talking about people and feelings and emotions, traditionally that's not something that was tied to the success of a business, right? And when I say success, really the bottom line, right? You'd have different people talking about it. Because of what the world's been going through, particularly in the last few years, there's a lot more conversation. When we think about the WHO, and, the World Health Organization, and even more of the stats that they're putting out, we're seeing things where organizations are getting the financial, right? So that profitability piece, that impact of not addressing these areas. So now it's becoming cool, for lack of better terms, to really try to figure out how do we really center this, right? And this is even for me within my business, why it formed, because I really wanted to help leaders understand in organizations, if you put your people first, your profits will follow. But going back to some of the stats, the World Health Organization has shared that, just depression and anxiety alone. So when we think about the scope of mental health, and again, not a mental health practitioner, just happened to be very fortunate to have grown up with someone who is now. And, we're talking about over $1 trillion lost in productivity, $1 trillion, which is more than the global, the GDP of some countries combined, just for depression and anxiety. That is, depression and anxiety do not run the gamut of everything related to mental health. Those are just two things under the umbrella. That's over $1 trillion to lost productivity in the economy every year. So it's important. And with stats like this continue to come out, I think organizations are waking up to say, wait a minute, we are losing money. And there's things that we need to do, and how do we get the support? So then I see, yes, that coaching. And I do think the one-on-one is helping, but that group coaching, right? That how do we collectively understand this? How do we embed this into business strategy? I think that's important. It's not just about, we're going to help you understand how to connect better with people or to recognize signs. It's how do we teach people? And as a coach myself, I think that's really important. How are we teaching these organizational leaders, the rising leaders, the current managers, the people who are entry level now, who will be leaders in years down the line? How are we teaching them now? Just like your son is learning the breathing techniques, how are we teaching now so that we bring that $1 trillion number down in terms of lost productivity. Because if we can help organizations connect the financial impact, right? And the more profitable they are, the more employees they can keep, and maybe these layoffs are not going to be happening the way they do. So it really is a cycle that we have to help people understand so that they see the value and not just we are responding right now because the pandemic and people are stressed and it drops off, right? We're seeing that in a lot of other areas too, where some of the initiatives, even DEI, for example, that everyone was on are now falling off. So this is something that we have to make sure doesn't fall off.
I don't have a lot to add. I mean, I think that when I think of the audience that's likely listening to us, most people probably fill the role of coach and therapist and guide and supporter, right? The HR role is oftentimes all of those hats combined. And so I think when organizations are thinking, how am I investing? What I've seen more sophisticated, capable organizations do is think about how they're investing in their HR organizations to then be able to build a cohort, a force field, essentially, that supports employees before problems become too big. And then beyond that, investing in the development of leaders who truly are the front line to employees, and not assuming because, Vinod, what you said, they have the job, they know it all, knowing that they don't, and then developing them to be sort of second line of defense should somebody need some help and support. And then I think the third piece, Natasha, to your question is people do go external to hire coaches for sure. And as a coach, I can say, I don't often have the full context of what's happening for a person, right? Coming in as an outside party, you're only seeing something through a keyhole. The true sort of meat and knowledge of the organization, the depth of it is best understood by the people living in it. And so while coaching can play a big and important role, and I've seen that almost by design as a third party, as a fresh perspective, as someone who knows what they're doing, the best line of defense to build resilience, I think, is a really strong HR team and a strong cohort of leaders, because they're the ones who are in it every single day.
Amazing. And I also see a comment from Monique in the chat which says, if you put your people first, your profits will follow. So given that as the next trending theme for my question, how do you see HR leaders and business leaders collaborating on redefining their learning and development strategy in the organizations, keeping in mind that cognitive resilience is important, mental well-being is important. There's a technology impact, which I will touch upon in my follow-up questions, is also important. And of course, when organizations remain human-centered, the commitment to the stakeholders and to the sustainability development goals increases many folds. So given all these factors, would love to hear your experience, some success stories, some failure stories of what kind of strategic learning and development goals are being relooked at by the business leaders and the HR leaders.
I will give the example and case what's happening in my company, and it's a very interesting story. Our senior management team, our managing director and chairman, decided that it's balancing lives, or life in balance is very important for the employees. And he actually said that there are two things of the life. One is materialistic things, which is our business, which is money, machine, all these materialistic things. And second is about the non-materialistic thing, which is actually mainly about the emotional part of the life, which is spirituality, intellectual. And we started focusing on 4 areas, and which is very important. And I like that very much. And that's why, it's aligned with the value system of mine also, that how as an organization, we are impacting the lives of people by personal development, social development, intellectual development, and spiritual development. Now, materialistic things is the business, is the profit, revenue, profitability, all these financial metrics are the materialistic things, the growth and all this part. And organization will look into that, of course, because ultimately that is the goals of the leader, that is the targets of the leader, and individual will also look into that individually, how their growth happening materialistically. Second is how our intellectual and spiritual growth is happening. And spirituality is nothing related about any religion. It is about the mindset. It is about the practices what we follow. So focusing that, what we started the intervention called as the balancing lives. In short, it is life in balance, where there are 48 activities and 7 sessions individually. We call as a content to contentment. We are the media company, so it's mainly on the content. And then we say that content to contentment, where we invited all the employees in the organization, batch wise, and they were trained 3 days on those activities with practical experiences, sharing the success stories, giving them some mindset, so because tool set and right skill set during those workshops. And there were forums created in the organizations, forum structure, where they were added in the WhatsApp group. There were team meetings, and they used to share their stories. That okay, and simple thing is start with having a conversation with family, conscious conversation with family. Mindful walk, for example, it is an activity. Or maybe some rituals which they can do, and meditation or mindfulness. And they started, or maybe chanting some mantras as per their own whatsoever practices. Like in Hindu philosophy, it is Om. In some other religion, it can be different. And slowly, when we started tracking the progress, the people started sharing that their relationship with the families are improved. Their relationship with the peers in the organization started improving. There is a positive sign in terms of their health, because then mindful walk was one of the activities. So they started losing their weight. So they are becoming fitter day by day. So you will not believe, we cover almost 60% employees till date during these workshops and the forums. And then we also started, it's also giving to the society back. So it's not only your development is happening as an employee, but how you are giving to the society. And that start with donating something. It can be your knowledge sharing with the society, with the underprivileged children. It can be giving some donation to the to bringing some impact in the life of poor people. It can be anything. And that slowly is the magic. Is a very long-term process. I will say it's individualistic, but it started because people at least their mindset is happening. They at least started thinking that yes, materialistic thing for me is very important. Career growth, or I can say the financial growth is very important. But my personal well-being, my family well-being, my mental well-being is also important. And then that balancing both things, that your materialistic life and spiritual life goes in hand. And if you have right practices, right activities you handle, it happens. Because in cognitive resilience, it's also that how we can create a patterns in the mind of the people. And if they started creating a habit, it's really helping them. I will say started creating a habit. You will not believe that in sustainability point of view, the employees going outside, planting trees and taking care of. It's not only planting, but taking care of those trees over a period of time. It's also happening. So there are those activities are also working well. And I must say that this is the leadership. It starts with the leadership. If leadership is not serious about it, it will not happen. It will be for HR professionals, I have seen there are many initiatives started in many organizations, but it's just a tick mark exercise. But the leadership is about serious. It has a success, I will say.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've learned in my work is when we expect people to be resilient for others, they have to be in a good place themselves. And so when we talk a lot about human-centered leadership at our firm, we always start with the human at the center, which is you. And Vinod, I appreciate what you shared, because so much of you comes in different dimensions. There's a spiritual version of you, there's a mental version of you, there's the emotional side of you, there's the social side of you, and each of those vary for each of us. That's the diversity story, right? Each of us have a different sort of makeup of what matters to us. And if we don't tend to that first, it makes it much harder to then tend to the needs of others. And so I think to the extent that we do that for ourselves, and then we do that for one another, and we understand the needs of one another, it helps us build collective resilience to be able to take on whatever is coming our way. And when we don't, then you start to see a breakdown. And something I've learned from a long time ago, and I went through the economic recession of 2008 in the US, is survivor syndrome, which is you may not be the one who went through something, but if you're beside the person who went through something, you also went through something. And so this notion of resilience being sort of contagious and collective is real. So if people can sort of see a colleague or a partner or someone go through something hard, they learn that they may be able to do it too. And on the flip side, if they see someone struggling, they may think that they too would struggle. And so focusing on self and focusing on one another has a lot of exponential value. And I think great companies are focusing on that, which is help people stay centered on who they are and helping them get to a good place, whether that's through philanthropy or support or therapy. I mean, I know a lot of HR folks coming in from everywhere. If you look at your own healthcare budgets, you've probably seen a spike in the use and partnership with healthcare professionals that are offering mental health or telehealth. And so people are looking for support and resources, and they're going after it. And so to the extent that we're doing that more and more, we build a more resilient workforce. And that's what I've seen. Good companies are doing that. I think the ones that are fearful, it's probably happening to them rather than them doing it themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to add another dimension, I think maybe from the strategy of learning and development in organization is always to push your employees to learn something new and to try something new, because this also builds resilience. And I guess also to do it together, because we mentioned that earlier today, that resilience has to do with the mindset, and we need to gain and maintain the growth mindset all the time in organizations, and also the trend of lifelong learning, which also build resilience and strengthening the capacity of one to go through tough experience, and also as the organization as a whole. And this is why I think organizations today and HR professionals need to push employees to learn and learn and learn individually, and also as a group. And maybe the fact that apropos we spoke about changing, and VUCA and Bunny and all those stuff. Today we also understand that the way people learn is completely different, and we need to go with the flow. No longer, we can bring them to class and teach them. We need to do some other things in order for them to be exposed to new materials, but also the way they learn. So I think that everywhere, when we are talking about resilience, it also has to do with learning and growth mindset, but it also has to do with new ways of doing those stuff. So it comes to life even in the way that we are trying to do it.
Yeah, those are really good examples. And, to go back to the question that you raised, Natasha, around, the role that HR is playing in learning and development in Bunny and VUCA, there's so many different ways, right? And I think really what it starts about is how do we teach people about adaptability, right? Because change is going to happen. It's the only constant in life, right? That things are going to change. And how do we really teach people within that context? So what type of agile learning strategies, what type of continuous learning, or reskilling, upskilling, right? Technology, how does that play a role? And one thing, just to give an example is, I worked for an organization and we started doing on the HR team scenario-based training to really help people basically role playing, right? If this happens or this were to happen, what do we do? And that came from, we were doing all these trainings and people were just checking the box. Okay, I've done my training, but what were they getting from it, right? And if we think about the way that the human brain works, when we have something to connect to a memory, we're more likely to remember it, right? So if you grew up with someone in your family making a certain meal, the smell of that meal or your familiarity with that, it really elicits an emotional response. And if we can get an emotional response from people, then we can really lean into things. So when I think about the context of learning and development and the role HR plays, it's how we're in these worlds, it's how are we helping the organization adapt and learn and implement new learning techniques that are not only going to connect and resonate with the organizational culture, but the individual person. And in the example that I am thinking of, we were working on cross-functional and cross-cultural teams. And what really helped was doing scenario-based planning, right? And training. What is something that might happen in this cultural context that may not be understood by the other, that may be offensive to that client or that colleague? And what do we need to understand? And we really saw a significant shift, not only in people's openness and willingness to lean into, being more collaborative, but just their comfort level. A lot of times because people are afraid, that's what's stopping them from engaging, right? And we have different responses, right? We, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, right? That's not always talked about, where we just praise whatever's happening, even if that's not how we really feel. So at least in the context I'm thinking of, it really made a difference when we focused that learning and development activity, not only on the scenario planning, but what scenario-based training led to was more collaboration and more collaborative training. And people were more willing to upskill or reskill because they were making connections with other people who were then teaching them new things. So that's how I see it for Bani, or my Bani VUCA example, in the context of learning and development.
Great. I was thinking to hold myself back with my last question, but I'm so tempted. We just have 6 minutes, but I'm going to give this a shot to the panel. My final question for the day: with AI catching up everywhere in every sphere of people-centered practices, business-centered practices, and of course, there are more technology disruptions expected in the coming months. How do you see AI enabling the cognitive resilience space, along with all the other factors that we have spoken and discussed in last 45 minutes with each other?
I actually like the combination, because I think people today, we are talking about the fact that machines will improve the human being, and the human being is improving the machine, right? And this is, it's going on and on and on and on. And I think the fact that today we can learn more about AI and ML and all the new technology make us more resilient. So I see it, as a bless. I think the challenge maybe is to be very cautious, or maybe very accurate on how much we are leaning on machines and technology, and not becoming one.
That's
So
really important. That's really important, not becoming it. Look, I don't think AI is going to or should replace humans. It cannot have the depth and breadth of the human experience that can relate to another human. But you said it, right? Like, how does it help support? How does it help enhance? And I think personally, as someone who loves technology, there are a lot of different ways, right, that we could think about this. One example of that is, predictive analytics, right? Analyzing the data. So if I think about this from the context of HR, what is your employee data saying, right? What is the mood? What is the sentiment? Even, benefits use, right? What are people, if for organizations that offer benefits, what are the trends that are happening? And with that ability to analyze that data, I think that can go a really long way. I also think about it in terms of, that could help predict for stress management, and then even think about it for chatbot for mental health support, right? Maybe it is someone just is able to fire off something quickly and they're getting some type of response. Now, I still think there should be a human, but that might just be an entryway, right? How can we create something like a chatbot, for example, that someone may feel more comfortable engaging with initially, because maybe they don't want to talk to someone, but then that chatbot is then recommended that they talk to someone, right? And making that connection for them. So I think the possibilities are limitless. I love technology, but I just want to share it should be used to augment and help support, cannot replace the depth and breadth of the human experience and the ability of humans to connect and really understand each other.
Technology and I think human it's a complementary. AI is the complementary. I don't see that there is a threat, because if you see the evolution of technology, every time there were discussion that okay, that will take, when first computer came, it was discussed that they will take the job of human being. When there are ERPs came, but it's never happened. I think right now one of the challenge is the technology or AI may make people intellectually, I will say, the paralyzed, because then your thinking power, your all this may go, and that should be used wisely. I think if you complement that for specific purpose, it's amazing results. I will say they give amazing results. So we need to understand that the first we should keep the people, either your employees, either your customers, in the center, and then you have to wave your technology around that. It is the other way around. We should not use the technology only for the sake, because it's for the sake of only using technology as it is a buzzword nowadays. But what is how they will use in the human interactions, and how that is benefiting the business and the human being. Understanding that aspects is very important. So I think artificial intelligence, definitely there are certain things will happen if you are not thinking, the roles which are repetitive of nature, or you don't need much attention, that definitely will impact it. But then organization also have to think that where to complement those artificial intelligence with the human being, because at the end of the day, artificial intelligence is a language model. It's a somebody has to design that, somebody has to do the coding, somebody has to give the inputs, and that's the human being, I think. So human being will never be replaced, but of course, and that's why what Charmin says, that skilling, reskilling, upskilling is very important, that how we can make the people ready for the future and how to use the artificial intelligence.
Awesome. This brings us to an interesting end to our first session of Day 3 Hacking HR series. Stay connected. My colleague Minola will be taking up the next panel shortly, and trust me, it's going to be another interesting conversation coming your way with the global panelists. Thank you so much, Vinod, Dalit, Charmaine, and Sumona has to drop off due to an exigency. Thank you so much, and stay connected. Signing off.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Learn a lot. Bye. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of the day you are enjoying on your time zones. It is so good to be back. This is the second conversation today, day 3 of our HR January series. And it is an extra joy to be part of these conversations that are dedicated to HR. We talked so much about how HR shows up for all the other functions, and it is a privilege to be here in a space that is for HR. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour or so, and we have an amazing lineup of panelists. And while Jessa will help me bring them up on the screen and giving them a few seconds to get used to their faces next to one another, I will just welcome everybody in the audience. Also, welcome back if you just rolled over from the previous absolutely awesome conversation. And first, a small request for help. Do drop us a few comments just to let us know, for example, where you're listening or watching us from. We always travel around the world through your comments and your chats. And that will also help us make sure that we didn't get stuck in some back loop in the wide LinkedIn space. And then also a very, very warm encouragement and recommendation. Do consider the chat your own conversation space. Whatever question you hear that is being raised amongst the panelists, drop us your own ideas, your own journeys, your own experience. We always learn so much from that. And we are always amazed by how richer the conversation gets as we see how additional nuances come up from different geographies and different environments, and just such wonderful intersectionalities that are present. I will wrap my intro blabathon here, and I will just make sure that we have a lot of space for conversation. Today is an amazing topic, and it is about navigating HR adversities, a toolkit for resilience and recovery. Now, what I will do, you're all friends and veterans of Hacking HR panel, so you know the drill. What I will do, I will pass the mic around clockwise as you appear on my screen, and please just shortly introduce yourselves. And also, do let us know what exactly was so special about this topic that you said, oh, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be part of this conversation. Why is this personally meaningful to you? Tristina, welcome. Good to see you.
Well, thank you so much, Manola. It's nice to see you as well, and to join the other panelists here. Thank you so much to Hacking HR for having us and for thinking of this brilliant topic for January, navigating HR adversities, a toolkit for resilience and recovery. My background, I've been in HR for a very long time. I've probably 25 plus years. HR, talent acquisition, and just in that workforce world. And most recently, I transitioned out of corporate into workforce development, and am really enjoying the journey of helping people on the other side. And why did I pick this toolkit? Because even though I'm still a part of HR. I am always wanting to heal and help my fellow HR cohorts. I mean, it's tough out there, and we need each other, and this is a safe space for us to talk to one another.
Wonderful. Thank you. Alexandra, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's so nice to be back. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Levitt, Alex for short, and I am a workforce futurist, which is kind of a fancy way of saying that I work with organizations and individuals to try to determine what has the greatest potential for disruption in the world of work in the next 5 to 10 years. And I've been doing this for about 20 years. So surely we've had an interesting period here that we're just coming past and trying to come to terms with. And the reason that I am excited about this topic, I know that I'm going to hear so many good suggestions from all of these incredible panelists. And my area that I'm interested in particular is the layoff situation and how that impacts people in HR. Because I think so often we focus on the operations associated with layoffs. Maybe we focus on the employees themselves that are being affected by this, but I don't think anyone really talks about or considers what it's like to be an HR professional, to be in the position of having to lay off hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And that's one thing I hope to touch upon today.
Thank you, Alexandra. Mental post-it done. We will pick this topic a little bit later into our conversation. And Dr. Tiffany, I've been following you for some time, and it's such a joy to finally share a conversation space with you.
Yes, thank you. And it's amazing to be here. So excited to be connecting here. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Tiffany Bowden. I'm a coach that specializes in organizational excellence and workplace empowerment. And I focus a lot on psychological safety as well as the intersection of inclusion. For me, because I support busy professionals, a lot of them in HR, CHROs, all the way down. For me, what was actually really interesting is that I have recently conducted a survey just within my own network and asked, if you really like peeled back the mask and answered the question honestly, how are you doing really? What would you say? And over 46% of the people said that they were struggling. And another 40% just said that they were doing just okay. And, very few people actually said that they were thriving. And I thought that there was like a real serious kind of crisis that was illuminated there. So whenever I have an opportunity to speak about adversity and fostering resilience, I definitely want to raise my hand and tap in here because so many need support right now. So really excited to be here.
Thank you. Cassandra, good to see you.
So good to see you, Manola, and happy 2024. If you didn't know yet, we're in a new year. So excited to be here sharing the virtual stage with these amazing professionals. My name is Cassandra Rose. I'm an HR executive, been in the HR space for nearly 20 years, and I have a concentration in employee benefits and engagement. For me, this topic was a resounding yes, because a lot of times HR people don't get to be an employee. We don't get to take part and enjoy some of the programs we're setting up ourselves. We're so busy taking care of others because that's our true nature, that I just wanted to spend this dedicated time and talk about my personal experiences and what I've seen be successful out there for HR professionals to be the employee that they want to be.
How awesome. And Happy New Year, indeed. I always say that it is socially acceptable to say Happy New Year until you're safe from the reflex of writing last year when you date something. So absolutely. Hola, Paco. This panel would not have been the same without you. Good to see you.
Oh my God, that was a good interaction. Hey everybody, Paco Farias, nice to meet you too, everyone, and nice to see you, Minola. You owe me a sweet hot chocolate right now, and just all of those. What do we need for the morning? So I've been on the people and culture space for a couple decades or more, and right now I'm in the capacity of a chief people officer for a real estate and construction company in the Houston area. And I am very passionate about this topic. I was, I'm watching Ted Lasso. Maybe some of you have watched it, maybe some of you haven't. But it's a TV series. I'm not going to spoil it, but let's just say that it's a football soccer coach that always presents a very positive outlook on life. Very, very positive. And sometimes, in a few situations, you can see what's really happening inside. And I sometimes think that we're the Ted Lassos, and we have to be the Ted Lassos with our employees, leaders, family members, and everything else. And I always put the smiley face, but how do you also build resilience and recovery for yourself? As we are employees too. And sometimes we're very alone in this type of thing. So what are some of the key tools and techniques we can use to preserve our mental health, psychological strength, and overall happiness?
I just want to ask you, Paco, I don't know if it's just me, but your audio is a little bit muffled. It sounds like you're joining us from a submarine, which is great if you are, but maybe we can find a solution, but we will take care of everything as we move along. Now, I remember I was looking at the title of the panel, and the word that actually stood out to me was resilience. And I know that this word, some people love this word. Some other people started to have quite a tense relationship with it. And it's just one of those words that, they seem pretty much self-explanatory, but as you go into conversations, you realize that people assign different meanings to it. The best definition about resilience that I heard comes from another Hacking HR friend. And she said that for her, resilience is not bouncing back, but it's about bouncing forward. So I would really invite all of us to take just a couple of minutes before we dive deeper into the wider topic. What is the meaning of resilience that you bring into the conversation today? And is there such a thing as an HR layer, an HR specific layer to that definition? And those of you who have been watching some panels that I've been facilitating know that I have this reflex to always open the question diagonally. That means that Dr. Tiffany, you will go first. You will be our pioneer today. And then everybody, the unmuting competition will be officially open. So Dr. Tiffany, what is resilience?
So I come from a very specific lens of being a Black woman in these spaces. And so this word lands in a very specific way for me as I'm present with some very high profile suicides that we have just recently, kind of been notified about. Dr. Bonnie at Lincoln University, as well as Dr. Nikita Mortimer. And so for me, when I hold resilience, I'm saying to myself, I deserve to be here. I deserve to be here, and I'm going to do the things that allow me to continue to show up in all of my light. So that looks like investing in my self-care, taking breaks, creating boundaries, and, so that I can, as you mentioned before, bounce forward. But, beyond just simply even a bouncing forward, it's just being able to kind of continue.
Wonderful.
What comes to mind for me, and that was very good, Dr. Tiffany. I feel the same way. There's just been so much in the news lately about folks who are not able to survive. And I think of resilience as surviving and thriving. One, because so often we are just fighting to survive and make it through each day and just keep smiling and sometimes pretending that everything is okay. But resilience is when you can thrive in that space and say to yourself, like you said, I deserve to be here. I earned this. Just the person sitting next to me is no more qualified than I am. They may have more degrees behind their name, but for some odd reason, the universe selected me to be in this position, in this role at this time. And so the more that we can look through that lens, the more that we can be resilient. I was recently reading or watching a video of where the gentleman was talking about, and I can't think of the top of my head who it was, but he was talking about not letting things bother you, pretending like that nothing is bothering you. And at first when I saw it, I was like, why would I want to pretend like nothing's bothering me? But the more that I listened to what he was saying, he was basically indicating that when you automatically assume this is not an issue, this is right where I'm supposed to be, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, this is exactly how things are supposed to be going for me, the more that things start to go that way for you, as opposed to when you feel as though I'm drowning and I don't know when I'm going to be able to come up for air. So that's what I think of when I think of resilience.
I mean, your statements are so powerful. And I think we're all fighting something, right? The pandemic, I think, was the great equalizer in allowing everyone to be like, I'm struggling with something. And it was easy to point to that one thing because it was universal. But prior to the pandemic and post-pandemic, we're thinking people are struggling and hopefully they're more apt to share. For me, the word resilience, I would say the first decade of just being in the workspace was how far can I go before I'm about to break down. And my resilience was just like, okay, now that I feel like I'm about to burn out, now I need to take a break. I've now changed that definition to boundaries. My resilience comes from being able to know way beyond my breaking point that this would lead to me breaking. How can I now better evaluate my workload, what I need from my partner, my friends, when I wear the different titles from whatever title I have at work to whatever title I have at home, sister, friend? How am I making sure that in each space I have the proper amount of support, the proper amount of boundaries to make sure that I get to understand what may be happening to me way before an alarm goes off? That to me is resilience.
Welcome back, Paco. Let's take Alexandra, and then we will check your audio. We're talking about what does resilience mean to us coming into this conversation. Alexandra.
Okay, well, first of all, I echo all the comments that have been made thus far. I think it's a really interesting spectrum of opinions, perspectives, but I think it all kind of comes down to some of the same things. And for me, resilience is almost always about upping the ante, right? So you go through something in your life, you're able to fight back from it, have a lot of learnings that you can take forward. But then the universe being what it is, you're probably going to have a challenge that's even more significant than that. And you're going to have to use the tools that you've already learned. Plus, you now have the opportunity or the challenge to learn new tools. And so I think resilience is kind of a lifelong skill building exercise. And some of us are in different parts of it than others. There are some people who go much of their lives without having a whole lot of adversity. Those people are more rare, but they do occur. And then they've got to build their resilience at a different rate than people who maybe have things from their childhood that they had to build resilience about. So I think from an HR perspective, understanding that resilience, people just have different levels of it. And it's both due to what they've been exposed to in life and also just their temperament and their skills and personality as an individual.
Well, I see that Paco is struggling with the connection. So let's go agile, not fragile, and then we will see how we bring him back into the conversation. Now, we do have the layoffs parked, and that will be the question after this one. But I would really love to hear what kind of adversities do you see HR practitioners navigating at the moment? What are some of the most common adversities that you pick up from your own work, from your interactions with other practitioners? And Tristina, I would invite you to go first.
Okay, awesome. So adversities that we're facing as HR practitioners, I think the biggest one is, we talked about this the other day, is having a seat at the table, and what that means. Because sometimes we have a seat at the table, but we don't have a voice at the table. And so that's the biggest challenge I think that HR professionals often face, is that we are experts by nature. We have to know our business. We have to understand the laws. We have to understand the implications of decisions that are made. We are actually navigating the business oftentimes from a deficit, because information is not always shared with us the way that it should be for us to make tentative and educated decisions. And then when we get to the table, when we do offer up something that seems to be thoughtful and has the content that is needed for the team that's before us, the executive team, if we're supporting them, it's often dismissed as, how could you know? You're HR. How would you know what the business needs? How would you know how we should be moving forward? Or at times, we sometimes are thinking about different options outside of layoffs. Since we're going to talk about those eventually, we can come up with other options, maybe not giving everyone a bonus right now, when we could maybe retain individuals. Sometimes those types of coachings go ignored, and what we're thinking about is the greater good of the organization, not just the financials of the organization. And so I think that often is one of the biggest challenges that HR faces.
I would actually build off of that and say some of the concerns are about thoughtful growth. As we think through, and we'll talk about, the layoffs of 2023, and we're actually starting to see some of that still come into 2024. Some organizations, have had that runway to rethink their cost model, rethink how they actually operate, and are now looking to add talent. And sometimes that can almost be scarier, right? Because now how do we ensure that the people who remained with us and allowed us to thrive are not overlooked, that they feel confident that they'll be considered for those leadership roles? And also, how do you promise new talent who may have seen our names in the headlines or gotten, seen a review on Glassdoor to trust that they should come put their future with us? So I think it's really important to also understand what growth looks like for those organizations that have the privilege to be able to do that. And how do you retain and encourage talent that's been through a lot of hard times and is starting to come out on the other side?
Alexandra. Oh, Dr. Tiffany, I saw you unmuted, and then we go Alexandra.
No, I would say Cassandra made really great points, and I would just say, for me specifically, I support a working group of diversity practitioners, and we've talked about like what are some of these areas of adversity that you face in your role, with all of them rolling up into HR, so they are a part of HR functions, and they would say that pouring into others without necessarily being poured into, like there's an imbalance there, a lack of support or buy-in and vision around what they do. A lack of resources is another one. So that can be in their compensation, or it can even be in terms of resources to actually do their jobs. And that sometimes coming from a lack of awareness as to what does it take to do the job, because there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into HR work. And that is very hard to document, the internal toll that it requires. And then if you don't have that requisite support, sometimes people don't necessarily feel like they can take off or show vulnerability being in an HR function. Similarly, if they do have challenges in the workplace with people who have, say, low cultural intelligence, or if they're even being microaggressed against, then there's concern about what can they do for help. Can they actually utilize employee relations or HR reporting, protocols, or is that something that is actually not really meant for them? That is something, that consistently comes up as well. And then I would say layoffs too. I would say that this particular area and function has been deeply targeted by layoffs, which has caused a lot of HR professionals to have to fend for themselves. I know of several people that are facing homelessness or are on the verge of it after giving their entire careers to supporting other people. They're finding themselves being let go, sometimes without severance. They don't have health insurance. They have families to feed. And now their lives are in their view, in a kind of a free fall. And so I think that, all of these things kind of come top of mind for me, given the intersection of HR that I kind of, most often support.
Those were all brilliant comments, and I couldn't have summarized it better myself. And I think it's so great that many of us are kind of in the trenches, seeing this play out in real time with different populations of people. One of the things I love the most about these panels. For myself, I would see. Probably what I'm going to say is going to be a little bit of a recap of what some of the other folks have brought up. But I think figuring out the strategic role of HR going forward has been something that is a great opportunity, certainly, but is also very stressful when you have been in a box, you've been in a silo for decades and decades of this career path, and now all of a sudden you're being asked to up-level your function. But as Tiffany said, sometimes you don't have the resources to do that. Sometimes you don't have the emotional or logistical support to do that. but it's being expected. And sometimes you're not sure how to drive that. And with that comes the integration of artificial intelligence based technologies in the workforce. Specifically, HR people are often in the front lines of that. And none of us have a skill set in how to provide proper oversight and ethical guidance for AI-based tools and make sure they're being used to benefit the business and benefit our people as effectively as possible. Nobody really has that skill set. So HR is on the front line trying to figure out, okay, what skill set do I need to have? And by the way, if I'm in learning and development, I need to make sure everybody else in the organization has those skills as well. So I think those are some challenges. And of course, other people have mentioned burnout from employees because they go to HR to talk about these things as they should. And sometimes we don't have a good answer. And the pressure in particular on middle managers now is astronomical, the things that are being asked of them. And so we as HR professionals, that's our job to try to figure it out. But I think these are thorny problems that really do impact our ability to be sane on a everyday basis.
Can I add something?
Yeah, wow, third time is the charm.
Apologies, I'm in a new office space and the typical Wi-Fi issues, and maybe you will not hear me 100%, so I'll try. No, just to summarize a couple of quick things that I've observed too, and probably a lot of us have been seeing social media videos recently of layoffs, an individual exposing HR and a manager when they were laying her off and sending a TikTok to the world, or another company where they are let's say not being very coherent with their vision of what they want to provide by not accommodating a specific employee with some situations regarding pregnancy and some more things. And also, the rise of free speech, where everybody can say anything on any platform at any time, and there can be quite a few attacks on anything that you can think about when it's skin color, when it's race, when it's religious preferences, gender, sexual education, whatever you want. And it can get quite complicated for the average employee and for HR to deal with some of those external tendencies, particularly because we can get quite fragile if you get exposed in some of those situations, both on our side and our employee side. So it's starting to collide now much more than in the past, where you say, get your personal life, it's out, your work life is here. It's starting to become much more convoluted. So I've observed now a significant rise of those interconnections more than ever.
Is this okay if I piggyback on that? I just was listening to what everybody was saying, and I was thinking about this recent, when Paco just mentioned social media. I was just thinking about that recent release on Cloudflare, where they had terminated an employee, the employee recorded it. And my heart went out to the HR person. Even though she was the one delivering the news, I could tell that she was not well informed by the leaders, that she was put in a position where she had to do the termination, where she kept saying, I'll get more information. And it was sad. It was sad to watch as an HR practitioner, because it was heartbreaking. It was such a poor display of what we are expected to do when delivering information. In fact, I felt like she probably should have asked to come back to the termination if possible, but I'm sure she wasn't sure what to do in the situation. But I see so often, and that's what I was referencing at the very beginning, is the powerlessness sometimes of HR, and how we are put in a position to make decisions, life-changing, life-altering decisions. And if you're not an empathetic person, or you're not a person who is compassionate, or doesn't have that ability to adjust quickly in a situation where you're kind of under fire, it's tough for HR practitioners. And people are depending on us to understand what to do in those situations, how to deliver the information. More homework should have been done before those terminations were presented. There should have been evidence. Employees are always going to ask, why am I being terminated? And And if it is actually the case of you're being terminated because we just don't have the money anymore, say that instead of making the employee feel like they were a poor performer. So I really, my heart went out to all of the people who were on that call, especially the employee, because I know she felt really lost in that moment. But I also felt very sorry for the HR practitioner.
We are right in the middle of our conversation. So the next one is not so much a question as it is an invitation to allow the conversation to flow where it naturally wants to go to, and that's layoffs. We've been parking this topic. I also saw in the comments references to layoffs within small companies where there's also a personal connection and a personal context to what is going on. So I would really want to take as much time as we feel is meaningful to allocate to this topic. What is the toll that layoffs take on HR professionals, and what are some of the things that you have seen being helpful or being, I don't know if validating, comforting, so many words come to mind when we navigate layoffs as HR practitioners? And Alexandra, I heard you claim this topic very early on. I would invite you to go first.
Sure. Well, this is near and dear to my heart. Just to give everyone a quick background about where I came to have interest in this. Back in 2020, probably around June, I was making a forecast for the U.S. Department of Labor about what I thought had the greatest potential to cause disruption post-COVID. Because at that time, we didn't know how long COVID was going to go on. We didn't know what the fallout was going to be. So, you know, as a forecaster, you just try to make a best guess at it. And there were two things that we focused on. We focused on escalating layoffs because we figured there'd be some degree of economic contraction. And then we also paired that with what we believed would be an escalating mental health crisis, because with COVID, we didn't know exactly what it was going to be like, but we knew it was going to be some sort of collective trauma. And so when I put together this forecast, the US government kind of came back and was like, all right, well, you're saying we've got 5 years. So what should we do? What can we do to be prepared? And so we received a federal grant to develop a program that would target emotional distress, things like depression and anxiety, among low to middle income workers specifically. And the reason we chose them is because they're the ones who tend to have chronic unemployment. They're the ones who don't get outplacement resources typically. And they're the ones who either might have a stigma around mental health or don't have the wherewithal to get mental health treatment or services on their own. So in going out and trying to figure out how to go into the world with this program, and the government believes in this program, and that's all nice, but a couple of observations have come to play that I think relate to this panel. Number one is that companies really don't, and this has been very disappointing to me, companies really don't want to invest in low to middle income folks they're letting go. And I mean even the most minimal investment. I mean, they'll spend tens of thousands of dollars on an executive that's probably going to have another job in a period of weeks. But frontline workers, low to middle income workers, there's just nothing. These people are just like let go into the world without any kind of support at all. And then that impacts the HR professionals, because imagine you're an HR professional who has to let go a bunch of frontline workers who you know might become homeless or might become destitute. What does that do to your psyche? So there's two problems here. There's the problem of just not having enough resources for these employees. And then if you're the person on the front lines in the HR role, having to deliver the news when you know it's going to be devastating. And so what kind of support can we provide for those folks as well? And we haven't actually created a program for HR yet, but be very curious over the course of this discussion to learn more from you about whether or not that would be a good idea. But essentially it has to do with this forecast I made for the Department of Labor and the US government, and really uncovering some of the difficulties that I think are associated with layoffs in this population of people.
Paco.
Oh, thanks for the insights, Alexandra. That was super interesting and really made me think and reflect. Well, I'm thinking there's a short-term, mid-term, and long-term view. And I'm going to go fast because if not, I could stay hours babbling. But what I'm trying to get into is the short-term is, if you ask me for one tool, it's just, how can you focus on the things that you can control versus things that you can't control in the moment, right? As an HR person, that's a short-term. And you can go into mindfulness, breathing, and some more things to control your emotion, to make sure you can keep yourself in check. And of course, all of the 360 help that you can get as a professional, including a therapist or whatever you need, so that you can balance all of the energy that is coming your way. Of course, some of you already have mentioned, you do have in your control, even with the worst managers or the worst whatever, you still have control of your words and your actions. So you can still try to make at least some lemonade, even if you get a little bit of a squirm of a lemon on a conversation with an employee. Even if you're with a terrible manager in the moment, you can try as much as you can to maximize your empathy, as much as you can to help out. Now, I understand that sometimes we're 100% like this. We cannot do anything. Okay. So that's where we're getting a little bit into a mid, into a long term. So when, we all can contribute on LinkedIn, on conversations with managers in many different ways to continue to expand understanding and awareness of how to bring back humanization instead of dehumanization. Because what happens, particularly in layoffs and many other things, it's very easy for all of us, including all of us, we can dehumanize people at some point, particularly when it comes to, to volumes of people. So what are the type of things that we can do to bring back some of that humanization that people understand? And one of my favorite tools is, a CEO that I really respect told me, hey, I lead 3,000 people, but in reality, I am responsible for all of them and their families, and maybe some others. So those type of small nuggets can have a significant impact when again, that's maybe a midterm to long term, when we're bringing back some culture and things like that. So it's a little bit of that balance of saying, what can I do in the moment to try to stay as much as I can and do the most lemonade that I can do with the small lemons that I have, versus also aligning yourself on what are the type of things that you can do to contribute so that the culture can bring back some of that empathy.
I'm actually going to use a little bit of Paco's framework and say when I am, entering a layoff period at an organization, there's pre-work, there's present work, and there's post-work. So with the pre-work, anyone who is going to be speaking to the employee, touching the document, right? I'm constantly reminding them that this is a human being. And our hope is always that whatever they go to next, whatever their next chapter of work is going to be greater than what they're leaving. So let us think through how we create a process that's the foundation of where we're going. And so for the pre-work, it's speaking to anyone who's going to be speaking to that employee, whether it's the manager, whether it's someone who isn't part of our organization, but helping us due to volume, right? What are some talking points? What are you noticing in the conversation? There's one thing of reading a script and just trying to get some legal statements out. And there's another thing of just identifying with another human being who's experiencing something for the first time that you had the opportunity to prepare for. So in that moment, if you notice that that person's becoming agitated, completely silent, be angry, holding space for that person. I allow that person to share what they're feeling in that moment, because you should be able to feel that way as a human being. And saying, I can see that something is occurring here with you. I'm happy to continue. I'm happy to take a moment and pause with you. I'm happy to reschedule if need be. And when you can speak from human to human, I have literally seen the entire conversation change. And they're saying, yes, you see me. In this moment, I know it's happening. I know this may feel transactional for you. I know that you have to do a job, but you just told me you saw me. And I think that's super important to keep in mind. And so one of the things that I always offer, and great point made by someone that, we don't always have the resources, but I pull from my EAP, I pull from my benefits vendors, I pull from our outplacement services to say, I want someone to be able to call this person today, tomorrow morning, and just say, hey, what can we do to help you? Whether that's, can we look at a job board with you, right? So I already know they're going to have a follow-up. For those employees who are not impacted, and to your point, Manola, for the person who's like, if I'm in a small organization, I know this person. I may see this person at the supermarket this weekend, right? Like, how am I going to get through this moment with them? Is saying that's a possibility and that's okay, right? I'm not expecting you to be best friends post, but let's create some survivor counseling. So that way, those who stay with the organization have someone to share those feelings with, that they may not feel comfortable with their manager. People who don't work with you don't understand the impact this is having on you. Let's bring someone in virtually to speak to you and allow that resource to you confidentially at no cost to you for a period of 30 days. And as an HR professional, guess what? You set up the program, you should be partaking in it. Make sure that you're getting the counseling you need in real time as well. And then what I would say post is just thinking through, how can you be supportive for other people in your network, right? We always think about direct correlation, this employee that was impacted at my organization. But there are several times throughout the week where I'll go on LinkedIn and someone's like, hey, I'm looking for a job in this. If I see a post from somebody else, I'll link them to it. I don't even know these people. If I see someone saying, hey, I'm looking for someone to come onto my team, and I know that person's a good leader, or I know that organization's really well respected, I'm putting the hashtag HR opportunities. Whatever little part I can play in someone else's future story of how they go from one opportunity to another, let's all do that. And that's how we as a community support each other without always necessarily knowing each other that closely.
Dr. Tiffany.
Yeah, as we were sitting here, I was thinking that, there was a study that came out a while back, and it came out while I was completing my PhD, that was talking about how there was, historically this rise of narcissistic leadership, particularly in the United States. And ultimately, what I've kind of been backing into is that, given that we've had that historic rise of narcissistic leadership, it really kind of like begs the question, like, where does that ultimately show up in our systems and our processes? To what extent do we have that kind of narcissism embedded within the culture? And, have we shaped certain functions to kind of perform like extensions of those personalities? Like, do we even really actually understand what that means and how we can kind of actually interrupt the cycle? In my workplace empowerment coaching, like, I work with folks and we talk about like the various different stages of like narcissistic abuse as a kind of a framework so that they can kind of identify what's going on in their world. So love bombing, like, when we bring people in, like, we kind of like give them all this swag, we tell them how amazing they are, we're celebrating them, and then eventually we kind of move into like a devaluation of some sort. And then, you get to this point of layoffs or termination, and that's like a discard phase. And when you're doing that, particularly when you're doing like a no contact, even if it's like a ghosting situation, that is creating a very, very traumatic kind of effect that we don't have to have. And it's like almost like we have accepted that as business as usual because it's so pervasive. But that doesn't have to be the way that business is done. So if you think about that in the sense of like, okay, that's what a narcissistic abuse relationship looks like. Okay, contrast that to what does a healthy relationship look like? Even if those relationships end, right? You can have mutual respect and admiration. You can do, effective and empathetic communication and problem solving. You can, invest in someone's growth and have mutual support. You can end things on, respectful terms. You can offer people closure. Like, I think that these are all things that we need to think about as HR leaders when we're going into our spaces. One, how do we create that for others? But also two, how can we carve out those things for ourselves? How do we advocate, for ourselves in order to kind of move the way that people interact with us more into that healthier state?
Oh, those are such powerful words. I mean, all of you guys said things that will definitely put in my toolkit and share with other people who are part of our community. I kept thinking when you said a couple of things you said, Dr. Tiffany. One is you were talking a little bit, or maybe it was Paco, about global community, and that there's actually, when you're hiring or terminating people in a global community, that becomes even more problematic at times, because other countries do have in the US anyway, other countries do have protections against how you terminate people, how long, what you have to pay them when they leave. And when you're doing global terminations, a lot of times the US employees do feel like it's completely unfair. Like, why are they getting this, or why are they protected and we're not? And we're not advocating for each other and one another on a national level to say, how do we actually protect not only ourselves, but also protect the people who are working with us? Should we have a mandatory 1 week at least severance? Should there be something that people have? Should there be some outplacement service or something? And for HR practitioners, I always think it would be interesting to see if we actually offered those services to people, not necessarily severance, because we can't do that. I don't have the money to do that. But if we actually offered services to people like career coaching or validation of their resumes, things like that, that we're doing on a more social level once people leave organizations. And I think, Cassandra, you actually mentioned that on LinkedIn, you often go to people's profiles and kind of help coach them up if they need it, or you see them send out jobs and you're posting it. And I see people often posting multiple jobs that they've seen listed just to encourage the community. And I think the more that we can fold into one another as a community, that's going to help us all to be able to survive these layoffs. There's also this predilection that we all should be somehow so strong that it doesn't affect us. And we're human, and it's going to affect us, even if we get it all right, if we do all the points right. So, you know, I've terminated people and they still reach out to me. They know that it was not personal. They understand that it was business. They understand their role in the termination, if it was a termination for cause. All those things are key to protecting yourself as a practitioner, because if you terminate people and you do it without the empathy that was mentioned earlier, and you're not protecting your own well-being, because that's going to eat at you. It's also going to come back on you. And when you make a mistake, because mistakes do happen during terminations, I've had terminations where I thought it was going to go fine and the person went off the rails and there was no getting them back on the rails. It didn't matter how nice we were. It didn't matter if we said, let's take a pause. They just were angry and they were crying and they were out of control. And like I believe you said, Cassandra, just taking the time to pause, let them have that moment, let them be a human being. But at the same time, remembering that if you made that error, you made a mistake, apologize for it. Even if you have to apologize post the termination, there should be no legal ramifications depending on how you do it. You need to make sure you check with your legal team. But if you say, you know, there was a discourtesy during your exit, I apologize for that, then you've cleaned that up for yourself. And I think a lot of times as HR practitioners, we are so busy trying to make sure we get it right and perfect, and that we don't want anybody to think we did the wrong thing. And there's all these legalities that we forget to be humans and that we can make mistakes too. And that we have to protect each other by acknowledging when we make an error or when we do the wrong thing or when we feel bad about terminating people. Sometimes we terminate people, we don't agree with the terminations. How many of you guys have terminated somebody and the manager, you're like, I don't know about this one, but you still had to do it. And in the end, you did the best that you could. And that's all that we can do each day, is to try to protect ourselves by being integritous, and then try to support others in our community who are also facing the same challenges.
It is so sad that we are 10 minutes away from wrapping this conversation up. I feel that this topic alone would deserve an entire series in and of itself, with everything that is going on in the world at the moment. Late last year, I made a promise to myself, and I cannot think of any conversation more deserving to keeping myself honest to it. And that is asking the speakers, in addition to everything that we discussed, what would you add or what would you highlight for those in the audience that are an HR function of one? Because there are people in the audience who live in that reality, and I cannot even begin to imagine how all this unfolds for them. So what would you add, or what would you particularly highlight for someone who is an HR function of one dealing with all this?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first on this topic because recovery is the word that came to mind, right? I love when people say I'm a recovering HR professional. As though it's something to cure ourselves from. And Dr. Tiffany brought up such a good point around the narcissistic leadership. And I think, and I challenge everyone in the audience to think of how many times have you thought, because I'm a team of one, I must go it alone, right? We just think those two things are correlated, and that is incorrect. I have realized by working in small organizations and large, there's so much that HR does that actually belongs to completely other functions, to finance, to facilities, to leadership, to the managers, honestly, even to an employee, someone who just started, came out of high school, this may be their first job. It's still on you, your responsibility. So for those people who are sitting on your whole team in your chair, I would say learn to network within your organization and better understand how you can partner with those responsibilities, not throw them away, not cast them aside, not delegate to people who don't report into you, but how can you lean into their expertise or their interests and really find ways that for synergy, for support, to better understand, right? And a real life example would be, hey, we now need to do bonuses, right? We did layoffs. There might be a little money here, but we have a pool that's very small. I'm pretty sure you're staying up at night just trying to figure out how to, take $10 and make it $1,000. Speak to finance, speak to your managers and say, look, there are certain people in your group that we already know we're not going to be able to really reward them in the way that they truly deserve. Let's think together about what have they been saying they need to be seen. Well, how can we support them? How can we recognize them outside of this bonus? It doesn't always have to be just you. Let other people support you and get those boundaries in place.
Tresina.
Sure. So I totally agree with that. And one of the things that you definitely can do is use your peer group. If you are on the executive level, use your peer group to say, hey, performance reviews are coming up. And I'm just thinking of a good example of when I was a one-man band and you're trying to get everything ready for everybody, you delegate to the other leaders some of that responsibility. You give them the framework, you give them the training that they need, and then you step away and allow those people to be the experts in their areas. Also make sure that, and we talked a little bit about seat at the table and voice at the table, make sure that you're communicating to your leadership team that you are looking for more of a voice so that they do hear you, so that they can help assist you. And then where you can, become a part of a network of HR professionals who may be able to give you free assistance through coaching and through sometimes resources that are available. Use the resources that are out there on the market. There are tons of them available. And that's my encouragement.
Thank you.
This is also making me think of one of the women that I support. This problem is actually not unique to people who are in smaller organizations, especially. From startups to, small companies, even mid-level. And one of the strategies that we've done has been more so managing up. Like perhaps it should not be a team of one. Perhaps you need more resources and you need more team. But, the issue is that sometimes leadership doesn't even fully understand HR enough to know that there needs to be more personnel. And they just assume that, we have an HR person, they can do all of the people-y things. And, they don't really have the visibility or awareness to understand, where they need these different specialists or administrative supports. And so use your annual reviews to advocate for yourself, where you have seen opportunities for you to kind of grow and expand into different roles, or to be able to add additional team members whenever you all are coming up on your quarterly, budgetary conversations. Use those as an opportunities to say, hey, we've been, seeing a trend in these sorts of things. We should consider, having X, Y, and Z. A lot of the folks that I support, they don't have, for example, an employee relations function. They maybe only just have like a generalist. They don't have, anything maybe beyond even that. So there's so many other functions that can be supported and that need to be kind of built out. But if you're dealing with leadership who doesn't really understand that arena, you may need to lead more than you think that you need to lead from the seat that you're in, which sometimes means also confronting imposter syndrome and knowing that you actually may be the subject matter expert to lead that conversation.
I love it. I can attest that, because right now I'm that. As we're a startup, that's it. This is me. And at some point I'm going to build my team. But, I have fallen into a trap now a couple of times of thinking that I can do everything. No, I can't. And also that everything's on me and blah, blah, blah. So my biggest advice is just be curious and be open. And I was researching. It's just a Google search away sometimes. There's so many open resources now out there, and support groups and support community. It can be very overwhelming on one side. It's where do I start? But it all starts with being curious and being open. As easy as this. In the same company that you work, you can be surprised. There can be quite a few people that can be interested in helping you with specific tasks or with specific things, more than you think. So just be curious, open, and be willing to get a little bit out of your shell to create a little bit of that extra community instead of just, becoming guarded.
Yeah, I think all the points that have been made have been excellent. And I guess I would conclude with just saying that look at it as an opportunity if you can. Most of the experiences in our lives can be looked at from a variety of different perspectives. And you could look at it as, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. I have to do everything. I have to do everything perfectly. But really what it is an opportunity to expose yourself to different parts of the function, figure out what's going to make the most impact and have the best outcomes from a business perspective. You've got a lot more freedom and independence toward integrating new technologies if you're not able to hire staff. So yeah, it's definitely not an easy place to be, for sure, being the HR of one, but I actually think that in terms of your own professional growth, there are so many golden opportunities here.
This has been an absolutely amazing conversation. We will wrap it up, and I will give all the panelists a small heads up. We will go into the wrap-up punchline round of answers. So I would ask you if you can share one punchline style takeaway, something from your own toolkit that helps you navigate the highs and the lows of the HR profession. What we will do, we will go counterclockwise. Paco will go first, but I will give you a few seconds, just enough to say a very quick but wholehearted thank you to everybody in the audience for taking the time and the curiosity to be here. And yes, this conversation is being recorded. You can find it later on our platform, hackinghrlab.io or LinkedIn Space. And with that, the advertising moment is over. So Paco, one takeaway punchline.
Follow the airline mantra. Instead of putting the mask on others, put the mask on you first. Take care of yourself, and then you can maximize care for others.
Thank you. Cassandra.
Make sure that you are your best employee. Resilience and recovery are something that you deserve.
Thank you so much. Dr. Tiffany.
Breakdown is a setup for breakthrough. So if you are one of those, 46% or so people that said that you are struggling, right now you're in good company. You have lots of resources in front of you, and please know that you're not alone, reach out for help. You have an amazing set of panelists here that are here to support.
Thank you so much. Alexandra.
Yes, don't beat yourself up. Everybody's doing the best they can. That includes yourself, and that includes the people around you. So try to focus on, again, someone mentioned earlier, things you can control, and just do your best every day and hope that that will be enough.
Thank you so much. Tresina.
Yes, I'll make it short and sweet. Trust yourself. That's all you can do, is trust yourself. And thanks so much to all of the other panelists. I really enjoyed you guys today.
This was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank
Tresina,
you.
Alexandra, Dr. Tiffany, Cassandra, and Paco. It was a joy. It was a privilege. Thank you. Thank you, everybody in the audience. And last but not least, a big, big thank you to Enrique and Jessa for making conversations like this possible. Take care of yourselves, and I will welcome you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Minola, for leading us.
Thank you, Manola.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.